This is CNN Breaking News.
We do begin with breaking news. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and all around the world. You're watching New Day, and it has been a painful night of violence and protest in Minneapolis. At this hour, fires are still burning on the south side of Minneapolis after protesters took to the streets to demand justice for George Floyd, the unarmed, handcuffed black man who pleaded with a police officer to let him breathe as the officer pinned him to the pavement with a knee to his neck. The city's mayor is urging people to leave the area, and he has reportedly asked the governor to call in the National Guard. In a moment, we will speak with George Floyd's brother for the family's first reaction to the anger and the unrest over his brother's death.
The Minneapolis mayor also says he does not understand why the police officer responsible for Floyd's death has not been charged. Overnight, police did use tear gas to disperse the crowds. At least one man is dead this morning. The circumstances still under investigation. Police say he was shot and killed outside a pawn shop near the demonstrations. As for developments in the coronavirus crisis this morning, we begin, though, with the breaking news out of Minneapolis. CNN's Omar Jimenez live on the scene. Omar, you've been up all night watching these developments. Tell us what's happening now.
Well, John, frankly, Minneapolis is waking up to parts of its city on fire. Parts like where we are standing right now, basically across the street from the Minneapolis Police 3rd Precinct, which has really been the central location for these protests. Protests that, as you can see, devolved into riots and multiple structures on fire. You just, as we pan over, you see the smoke billowing across the entire southeast Minneapolis area here. And this, as smoldering and as on fire as it is, when we first got here, right before that or so, this was a 2-story building. There was a whole other section that was completely engulfed in flames and then eventually collapsed. Now you go across the street from this building. You see how the police are set up in the middle of the road right here. They had formed a little bit of a roadblock to prevent people from going across the street into literally what was an active scene of fire this morning. And then across the street is the parking lot where you see some grocery stores that have been looted. And again, this is what happened as the protest began largely peaceful in at least 2 locations across this city, and then it devolved into riots. Now you go into the central reason that we are seeing these protests. It is for the death of George Floyd, but also how that death unfolded. We have seen that while the officers were fired pretty quickly, the 4 officers involved within 24 hours of this happening, the family says they want more than that. And that is a mentality that we have seen echoed throughout the protesters. We have seen the mayor of Minneapolis chime in on that as well, saying that these officers needs to be charged, and at least the arresting one, he does not understand why that officer is not behind bars. We do know the investigation is still playing out at the FBI level, at the state level and beyond, trying to gather all the facts. But every minute that goes by without at least an announcement of either some charges or not, the people here grow restless. And again, the central point is how George Floyd went from, in a matter of minutes, pleading for help to what eventually became an eternal silence. Allison?
Omar Jimenez, thank you very much for being on the ground for us. We will check back with you. Joining us now is Philonise Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, and their family's attorney, Benjamin Crump. Philonise, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. We're really sorry for your family's loss. We know that you are all deeply grieving right now, but when you see what has happened overnight in Minneapolis because of the anger and outrage about your brother's death, what are your thoughts this morning?
Well, I want everybody to understand that it's just like a child searching for attention. They're doing everything positive, and nobody's listening. And all of a sudden, they just start acting out. So I want, everybody to be peaceful right now, but people are torn and hurt because they're tired of seeing black men die constantly, over and over again. I spoke to Eric Garner and Mom and Reverend Al Sharpton, and her son couldn't breathe. He kept saying he couldn't breathe, and my brother said the same thing, that he couldn't breathe, and nobody cared. And these officers, they need to be arrested. right now. They need to be arrested and held accountable about everything because these people want justice right now.
And what is justice for your family? What does that look like?
Justice is these guys need to be arrested, convicted of murder, and given the death penalty. They need to because they took my brother's life. He would never get that back. I will never see him again. My family will never see him again. His kids will never see him again.
Have you watched that video of your brother's arrest?
I watched the video. It was hard, but I had to watch the video. And as I watched the video, those 4 officers, they executed my brother. The paramedics, they drug him across the ground without administering CPR. They showed no empathy, no compassion. Nobody out there showed it. Nobody.
It's just hard to understand what was happening. I mean, it's hard to understand what they were thinking and what they were doing in that video. Your brother was at most suspected of a non-violent minor crime. And so when you watch that, how has your family tried to process what you saw on that video?
It's right now. It's hard. We're pulling together constantly. A lot of crying going on for justice. You know, it's just constant. You can't go anywhere. Every time you look up, you see it on TV. His lifeless body. They just drug it across the ground, and we all, you know, we have pain, a lot of pain, and everybody has pain right now. That's why all these things are happening. You know, so it's just, if anything could work out in a whole nother place right now, I wouldn't want this for anybody else. I'm just tired of seeing black people dying for anything.
Yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone.
Ari Sellers, CNN political commentator and author of a new book, My Vanishing Country, and former NFL wide receiver and journalist Dante Stallworth. Gentlemen, it's not easy to watch Philonise Floyd talk about his brother, but think about how hard it is for him to watch the video of his brother dying while pleading for his life. And Bakari, a couple words that Philonise used again and again: tired. He's tired of this, and then nobody is listening.
Yeah, Ella Baker said, until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons become as important to the rest of the country as the killing of a white mother's son. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until this happens. She said that in 1964. And we're still echoing those same cries today. It was hard to listen to that interview. It's just so much pain. You get so tired. We have black children. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I mean, what do I tell her? I'm raising a son. I have no idea what to tell him. It's hard being black in this country when your life is not valued. And people are worried about the protesters and the looters. And it's just people who are frustrated, who for far too long have not had their voices heard. And so, you put me on after his brother, and I feel like I lost my brother. And nobody cares about the video. They had a video in Ahmaud Arbery, and 2 different solicitors looked at that video and declined to press charges. And so for those of us who have a mistrust of the system, it's very hard for us to do anything else other than just to cry this morning. And then hope and pray that we are not sitting next to Ben Crump one day. That's about all we can do.
Bakari, your father was shot more than 50 years ago. 50 years ago. And we're sitting here this morning and watching it happen again. So where do you find the hope? How do you tell your son and daughter that it's going to get better?
I don't know. I mean, maybe Dante has the answer. I don't know. I mean, I try to keep hope. I try to keep faith. I keep telling my children they can be free. You know, I want my kids to one day be able to grow up and be the host of New Day. I want them to be able to be a United States senator or a president, but, you know, what happens if they get pulled over and they can fly? What happens if they get judged by a father and a son who just are on a good old-fashioned South Georgia lynching? What happens if they get served a no-knock warrant like Breonna Taylor? I mean, what happens if that? How do you raise your children in this America to understand free when we see these images of them being gunned down in the street and a knee in the back of the neck for 8 minutes like a dog? So I don't have that answer. Other than every day, I just tell them I love them. That's all I can do.
Dante, I'm not sure there is an answer necessarily, although you point to Angela Davis, who says it's not enough to be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is the hardest to learn for people who are not in the space of learning about racism in this country. There are a lot of people who believe that racism ended after the Civil War. They say that we fought a whole war over racism, yet they don't acknowledge the fact that the Confederacy was there to remain, to keep the institution of slavery alive. After that, we had Reconstruction, and then you had Jim Crow, you had the Civil Rights era, and it seems that things that people had been talking about back in those times, and especially during the Civil Rights era, are still happening today. When Martin Luther King was forced to discuss the riots that were happening, they blamed him for the riots. And Martin Luther King said that the language of the unheard is why these riots are happening, and that America has failed to listen to the cries and to the promises of freedom and justice that they have promised since the founding of this country. But yet, as we still see today, we still see African Americans are not being treated as human. As Bakari said, you know, I have friends and family who have kids of all ages. And when your children are leaving home, when they go to school, you never know if they're going to come home safe. And that's not an exaggeration. That's a real, honest fear. That's a palpable fear that we've seen. And unfortunately, even when it's on video, it seems not to matter, because then the detractors, the people that are in opposition of freedom and justice, will look through anyone's background, whether if it's something that happened in the past, they will try to bring this person down and make excuses for the reason why this person died, even when they're on the ground face down with 3 officers on top of them. When they're telling you they can't breathe, people will look to find reasons why this person was killed instead of going to the root cause of the problem. And that, until we can figure out and understand why that continues to happen, why this psychology of racism has perpetuated not just in police, but in this entire country, in the entire system, the justice system of this country, things like this, unfortunately, will continue to happen. And you will see, unfortunately, the results of the language of the unheard. You will continue to see these riots happen until actual, real justice is served. Language of the unheard, you will continue to see these riots happen until actual, real justice is served.
Look, after Ahmaud Arbery was killed, I've walked into dozens of construction sites in my life just to look around. Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post sent me a text and says he would never do that because he fears for his life. It just shows how different things are if you're white or you're black. Dante, I also want to put up on the screen an image that's been shared, thousands of times over the last day. It's the picture of the police officer with his neck on George Floyd's, with his knee on George Floyd's neck, and it's the picture of Colin Kaepernick kneeling. Bernice King tweeted out saying, "If you're unbothered or mildly bothered by the first knee, but outraged by the second, then in my father's words, you're more devoted to order than justice and more passionate about an anthem that supposedly symbolizes freedom than you are about a black man's freedom to live." I know that these pictures resonate with you.
They do, and unfortunately, I saw this image of the police officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck, even as he was saying that he couldn't breathe, and he was losing consciousness, and the bystanders were pleading for the police officers to spare him his life. And Dr. Bernice King was right on. It's something that I saw immediately, and unfortunately, it just continues to happen in this country. But that was something that was a visceral image to me, was when I saw the officer kneeling on his neck, and I thought about, this is why the players are kneeling. This is reason 1 million why the players are kneeling. And you saw that image going around social media, and it's true. It's true. It's really hard because there are so many people who do good work in this space. There are a lot of folks who go every single day and try to make this country live up to the principles that this country was founded on. And yet and still, here we are in 2020, during the pandemic, on Memorial Day, where you see this happen.
Bakari.
And the players have stood up, and it's something that Colin Kaepernick went out on his own initially to do this, and he's now no longer has a job. And, it's been years now, but he no longer has a job because he was protesting and trying to stand up for people who no longer have their lives.
Bakari
have stood up, and it's something that Colin Kaepernick went out on his own initially to do this, and he's now no longer has a job. And, it's been years now, but he no longer has a job.
We've got just about a minute left, and you've been with us all morning long and outspoken. And needless to say, on social media, there's been some criticism, people saying you're condoning what's happened overnight in Minneapolis, and you're not. And it's not about condoning violence. No one wants to see buildings burned. It's about understanding why they're burning.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we've been crying out for is for white people in this country to have a sense of understanding about the pain and trauma that it is to be black in this country. And until you have some semblance of understanding and hear our voices, I was talking to T.D. Jakes not long ago, and you can teach me arithmetic, and you can teach me the English language, you can teach me physics and science, but you can't teach me blackness. And one of the things that I think that more people need to do is just take a moment to listen, and listen to those voices as they cry out in Minneapolis, listen to them as they cry out in Brunswick, Georgia. The plight to cure racism in this country is not on the shoulders of black men and women. It's on those individuals who don't suffer from this level of oppression on a daily basis. And so I hear those people, and those same people, John, that are chastising these protesters are the same people who were applauding the white boys carrying the AK-47s on state capitals earlier in the spring and summer. And so I just kind of shake my head at that. But at the end of the day, we lost another life. And I think the sad commentary about where we are in this country, people like me think that this country is vanishing and the dreams thereof are vanishing, is because I'm afraid we'll probably be here in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or another month with another George, another Breonna, another Ahmaud. And for many black people in this country, they just pray to God it's not one of their loved ones. And that's an unfortunate state.
Dante Stallworth, again, the words of Philonise Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, nobody is listening. I hope people hear what he said. Dante Stallworth, Bakari, thank you very much.